think this is day 4. We're 4 days into December, guys, and I have not bought a single Christmas present. I have bought stocking stuffers, but I haven't bought a single Christmas present. I haven't done anything yet. Kind of weird, but oh well. So today it's going to be a little different. It is bookish eventually, but we're going to start off with Monday night. I saw Bonhoeffer. I actually went to the theater. This is something I never do, but I did. I went to the theater because I have such a deep respect for Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I wanted to see if they did his life justice. And I've heard mixed reviews, but I haven't heard any really bad ones. So I was like, I don't know. And here are all my thoughts. So if you don't want to know about Bonhoeffer, the movie, with the spoileriness, I mean, it's his life. So if you know anything about his life, there is no spoiler. But, you know, it's kind of like biblical fiction. You know the story, you know, the whole thing is a spoiler because you know that David kills Goliath. It's no big shock. But we all know what happened to Bonhoeffer. But this explores kind of the origins of where that came from and everything, and it was really good. So if you don't want to know, though, if you don't want my opinion on the movie, I'll try to remember to put timestamps in there. But I've been looking forward to this since I found out it was coming. And I was like, yes, because yes. And up front, I'm going to say, I don't think it was amazing, but I think they did a really good job. And I'll get into why I didn't think it was kind of like it was amazing for me. I loved it, but I don't think it's amazing overall. So, a few things about it. Number one, they left things out that weren't essential to the Nazi, part of his life. They put in things that led up to how he reacted and stuff, but things like his fiance, we have no clue that she ever existed. There are things like that. I remember reading a lot and getting a lot of info about his mother. This showed that he had a really neat relationship with his mother, but it also showed a really neat relationship with his father that now I want to go look up and see how accurate it was. I don't see a reason for them to change, that. And so I don't know. But one of the things that kind of jarred me out of the story was at this one point, Dietrich says that, this doing this thing to stop Hitler is his destiny. And I was really bothered by that because it didn't fit who I know Bonhoeffer to be. I've read a lot by him, and I've, read biographies and even, fictional books, and destiny, it just didn't really fit. So I got home and I went and I looked up the German word for destiny. And because I'm assuming that's what he would have said it in German, right? And so I looked up what might have been quoted. I mean, I don't even know if that's a quote, but I'm just going to assume that it was a quote. And if it was, what might he have meant? Because words don't always translate the same, right? That's why we look for really good Bible translations. And it's why we look for really good translations of things like Victor Hugo and Alexandre Dumas, the Russian literature. We want a good translation so that it stays as close to the original as possible while still fitting in our, mindset. Some things don't translate. And so I wondered, is this one of those German words that we don't have a close equivalent? And I found out that that's not necessarily true. But their word for destiny has several meanings. I don't want to say a lot. It was like 4 or 5 maybe. It had several meanings. And one of them was purpose. One of the meanings of the word, it starts with best something. Best and dumb or something. I don't know. It's a word that starts with best something. I remember because I remember thinking, like bestemor in Norwegian, which is grandma. So I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. I kind of get it. But when I saw purpose as one of the meanings, I was like, that feels like a better translation. And this is just, me extrapolating what I feel like Bonhoeffer would say based upon other things, and all the stuffness, right? But it just felt like it fit better, right? So I'm mentally now translating that whole scene with purpose, and it all fits. It fits the time, it fits his theology, it fits everything. And so because of that, my little quibble there is gone, which was kind of nice. And you get the story from when he's a little boy and his brother is going off to World War I to him coming over to America and being introduced to like the gospel churches, those deep southern, but it's not because it's up north in New York, but that with those southern roots, with the really amazing black churches with their gospel choirs, and he got introduced to that. And then they go to this nightclub. This is Prohibition. I don't know what's being served there, I'm just saying. But he goes to this nightclub, and I'm making assumptions here, and I have not looked this up. But the guy in the nightclub playing up on stage has to be Louis Armstrong. It has to be. They found someone who has Armstrong's grin. And if it's not Armstrong, why would they do that? So I'm thinking it's supposed to be Louis Armstrong, but he learns to love jazz, which doesn't really sit well with his more, upper middle class or upper crust parents. I'm not sure which they are. But, he goes home and he's playing, and they're just kind of like, what is this noise? Kind of like how I feel with most modern music, They're like, wait, what? So, and I happen to love jazz, so, I'm not anywhere near upper crust, but I just don't I've never really been a fan of rock. Yeah, I know, sorry. But, so it's just like, you see, but even when he was in New York, they show him interacting with this black friend of his, and the absolute racism that this guy deals with, and how he deals with it, and how it angers Bonhoeffer, and it kind of sets up the stage for why he did something so radically different from many Germans and Americans, because, and you see this really well in Sarah Sunden's When Twilight Breaks, and Kristallnacht is shown, or at least the after effects of Kristallnacht is shown in the movie, but that When Twilight Breaks, that's what it's about. And in there you have Peter Lang, who is an American teaching in Germany. He's teaching enunciation using many of the techniques that my dad used to teach me to speak properly. When I was born with a cleft palate, and they did the surgery on me. They left 2 holes, which I just literally this week found out why. Author Amanda Wen has a son who had reconstructive surgery too, and he wasn't given a uvula. I have one, but he wasn't given one. So I don't know if they gave me one or if I was born with one for some reason, but for whatever reason, I have one, he doesn't. But I have the holes still. And when I went looking it up, because, I realized there are different ways that they do surgeries, and she had mentioned 2 surgeries. And I was like, wait a minute, was I supposed to have another surgery? I don't know. So I go look it up, and yeah, they leave holes in the roof of your mouth so that as your mouth grows and as the palate grows, it gives you, room for it to stretch so that it all works well. And then later, apparently they usually go back in and fix it. Well, that never happened to me. I still have holes. If I'm not careful, peanut butter is really bad. Peanut butter gets up in there and you're like fighting to suck it back out with your tongue. It's really hard. I'm just saying. But enunciation. Let's get back to this whole enunciation thing. Because of those holes, I had a really bad speech impediment. I talked like this. It was really bad. And as a matter of fact, my sister got in a fight at school because Stacy... No, it wasn't Stacy. Cindy somebody or another. Can't remember her last name. But Cindy somebody or another made fun of how I talked, and my sister lit into her and got in trouble. But I think that when Dad went to pick her up, he found out why she got in trouble, and it was one of the probably only times a kid got in trouble at school, and Mom and Dad did nothing about it at home. It was like, good job, move along, Family is, you stick up for family. And I know that my one brother got in trouble for refusing to put something that wasn't true in a paper. It was historically inaccurate. And my dad went to talk to the teacher. The teacher was really ridiculous. I'm really glad that I personally never had any teachers like this, but Schwinn had one that was just so bad. And basically her response was to Dad showing her where this is wrong. Her response was, she pointed to her teaching degree and said, "Oh, where's your degree?" That's her response. And I'm like, which is why my parents pulled me out of schools, where they have no control, and put me in private schools where dollars talk. And that was really hard on them. I'm just saying, when you don't have any money and you try to pay for private schools, that's really hard. But they did, and I'm grateful for it because I knew my parents were going to back me up, and they did. So all of that, totally irrelevant, but the way that my dad taught me to speak, for one thing, you'll have a hard time believing that I was an obedient child, even though I was. But my dad, I knew at 3 years old, probably younger, but I know at 3 years old, I knew what slow down and enunciate meant. But he used those techniques that Peter Lang is researching in Germany to teach and to, so there's that, right? Well, Peter Lang didn't see the problem with Nazi Germany. And Sarah Sandham put that in there because Americans, for the most part, didn't. They didn't see what the problem was. After all, we had World War I. Germany had to pay some nasty reparations. It was really expensive. The whole world was drowning in debt from it, and then in a depression. But Germany is coming out on top. They are doing well. Their people are flourishing. They're prospering. And so people really looked at Germany as like, this is a good thing that's going on over there. They had no clue, right? Even when they heard little rumors, they didn't believe it. Why should they? Everything looks great. And so, because of that, Bonhoeffer, if he hadn't come over and seen what happens when you have this mentality of lesser than and greater than because of the color of eyes or skin or hair, this is a problem. And so I love, you can see like the hand of God in it. It is so cool. And so, he goes back, and then, when he's like drawn into this plot to stop Hitler, one of the things they do is they send him back to America. They send him to England. They send him all these places. Okay. So this is the plot. This is the story. We get him caught. We get him sent to prison, and we get, his death. We get it all. It's all in the movie. But this is where I felt like they made a mistake, because the movie is told in time jumps. We have back then when I was a small child. Now I'm in Germany. I'm in the USA, and I'm learning this stuff. And then back as a small child, and now I'm home from the USA and all this stuff. And then back to here, over to here. And it's just like this slow back and forth progression. It reminds me a little bit of what they did with the newest Little Women. And it didn't confuse me because I know Bonhoeffer's story reasonably well. But my husband only knows vague stuff. So I was convinced that he wouldn't like the movie and he would be confused. I think some viewers would be. I do. But he made the comment on the way home that it was a good movie, that they did a good job, and, he moved along. He hasn't had any complaints. So I don't know if he, for some reason, maybe he knows more about it than I think he does, or maybe it was easier to follow than I'm assuming it would be, or it just might jive with his brain, which I think is absolutely not true. I'm just putting that out there. He usually has trouble following stuff like that. So for what it's worth, I say it's a good movie. I really liked it. I feel like there was a single word in there that kind of threw me out. I didn't expect it. Was there? I don't know. But I feel like there was. I would almost put money on having caught a word. But now that I'm disassociated enough and I haven't thought about it since then, I can't guarantee it. But I think there was a single word. I think it was a mild expletive. But they were always very respectful of God. But because I had that issue with Destiny, it's possible my brain is confusing it because I've had a lot of stuff downloaded into my brain in the last couple of days. So just throwing that out there just in case. Now, because of that, I recommend When Twilight Breaks. Great book, 5 stars for me. I haven't finished reading it on Goodreads, and I need to because, you know, I want her to have that review, but I haven't done it yet. Anywho, also, totally off topic here, but I'm going to put it in because I know I'll forget if I don't. I don't know about other people. I can't review on Amazon because I'm an author and they decide that whatever I say can't possibly be true because I'm just being nice to other authors. Even though I don't always leave a good review. But, oh well, whatever. So I'm not allowed to review over there. I'm totally suspect. But I leave reviews on Goodreads. And if I am affiliated with the author, like Kathy Swanson's Christmas Camp, I showed it the other day. That was in one of our collections. We had 4 authors and it was in the collection. I always put in there, I am in the collection with this author. So take what I say, with that understanding. If you want to see it as me being biased, then go ahead. If I didn't like it, I would probably, since we're in a collection together, it's an older one, so maybe I would have done it. But probably I just wouldn't have reviewed. But usually if I say I like a book, it's because I like a book. I don't think I've ever said I liked a book that I didn't. I have said I liked a book that I changed my mind on. And vice versa. I've said I didn't like a book and then went, actually. So just putting that out there. I can review on Goodreads, but I was never, and I used to be able to do it on Barnes & Noble, and now Barnes & Noble has decided I'm an author, I'm not allowed to do it. Okay, fine, whatever. But Christian book distributors, I couldn't do it because every time you copied and pasted, it turned all punctuation into that gobbledygook. And I am not going to go back through and redo I just found out they stopped doing that. I haven't tried it myself, but they had a whole conversation on avid readers of Christian fiction where people are able to copy and paste their reviews in and it doesn't change all the stuff. So if you've avoided reviewing on Christian books, I'm just saying, christianbook.com, if you used to avoid it, you don't have to anymore. Yay! And then I always put it over on BookBub as well. So that's where I review for whatever. Totally freebie there, but I had to share because of that. So When Twilight Breaks is not really about this. I don't remember Bonhoeffer even coming into that. I don't think so. No. But there we go. So there are 3 Bonhoeffer books, though, that 2 I can absolutely recommend, and 1 I think I can. The one I haven't read all of it yet. I've just read little snatches. So the first one I don't have anymore. I read it. I sent it to my daughter, and I don't know where it is now. She probably read it and turned it in for book credit. Why wouldn't she? So but that is My Dearest Dietrich by Amanda Barrett. She did a fabulous job of researching Dietrich's relationship with his fiance. And then kind of what happened to his fiance afterward. And, that's very short and small. But it was that, wait a minute, was that part of the story, though? Or was it author notes? I don't remember. But there is a little bit about, what came afterward, et cetera, et cetera. My Dearest Dietrich, it was really good. It wasn't overly sappy, which was, a blessing. It was just a really neat, and I feel like it was semi-epistolary. Don't quote me on that. But I feel like it was. A lot of that relationship was conducted through correspondence. So it probably was. But I got to look that up now. If I look it up, if I remember to look it up and I, do the whole 9 yards. If that, then I will put it in the description. So, yes, it is epistolary. No, because there is epistolary January coming up and you might want something more. So, it is fiction, but I think it's pretty accurate. And then The Faithful Spy by John Hendricks. This is a graphic novel. See, I've only gotten that far in. And then, skipped around, checked out some of the little things to see. You can't see what I'm doing. So I have skipped around and I've checked out some of the little like sidebars. Sometimes there's a little side, not there. Come on, where is it? Like here, there's this little sidebar thingy. You know, I've looked at that and, you know, just kind of gotten a feel for some of those little things just to check out the book. But this is a really neat graphic novel. I sent it to my grandsons, I think. And, you know, it's basically, this is completely, if I recall correctly, this is completely focused on the plot to kill Hitler. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about Bonhoeffer is that he was a pacifist, and yet he got himself involved to stop the senseless killing. You know, basically, he's like the German Sergeant York of World War I. You know, Sergeant York did not want to go over there. He got his conscientious objector status revoked. You know, he's like, or refused, and you know he had to go, and he was a great marksman, so they were really excited to have him. And he didn't like it. You know, he didn't want to have anything to do with it until he saw those machine guns just cutting down all the men in his, I don't know, unit, or I don't know what they're called, but the men that he was with, I always get those orders mixed up. But he saw them, they're just getting mowed down. And so he decided he had to stop the guns to stop the, you know, killing of just massive numbers of people. So that was his idea, was the best way to stop the killing is to stop the guns. So he has to stop the men shooting the guns. And then they took all those guys prisoner, and, you know, so it's kind of that kind of thing, you know, where for Bonhoeffer, we've got to stop Hitler, or all these people that are getting killed it's just going to get worse. And it did, you know, but every time I see the dates on Bonhoeffer's execution, I wonder why did the Lord decide to let this happen? He didn't have to let it happen, but he did. And I wonder why. There has to be a reason, because we're talking, it's like 2 weeks. You know, I think it's just slightly less than 2 weeks. It's either like a day or so before or after. It's just right around 2 weeks, which happened in Austria as well. There was a guy, Mengele, whatever the last name of the guy in my Ransom Greta, whatever his last name was, he also was a resistance fighter who was killed just days before, just within 2 weeks of the end of the war, you know, trying to stop. And it was just like so much of that. And why, you know, what the Lord has to have a reason. But I'm like, we have so many volumes of sermons and information and, you know, teaching from Bonhoeffer, and had he just done his work on earth, and, you know, it's time to be done? Or, you know, would the temptation to become more important than, you know, the message he's bringing, would it have brought him down, so God took him out? You know, why? I don't know. We can't know, but it always, you know, fascinates me and keeps me curious. But then one of my all-time favorite books, I can't get to my copy. I tried. I managed to pull this one off, but I could not get to my copy. But The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I remember reading it. It was the early 90s. No, it was more like the mid-90s. I read it. It was so good. And I remember particularly the part about cheap and costly grace. And I remember thinking, finally, someone has said, you know, what needs to be said. And then I realized, no, actually, he said it long before it became such a huge part of the church in my time. And so it's not finally, it's, you know, in preparation for what we need today. He has said this, but his Cost of Discipleship is such a good book. I totally recommend it. So it's like we have nonfiction spiritual disciplines book, and then we have nonfiction story version of his biography, and then we have a fiction, My Dearest Dietrich, about his thing. Those are the Bonhoeffer books I recommend, and I really think that everyone needs a bit of Bonhoeffer in their life. So that's my take. If I had to give the movie 1 to 5 stars, for me personally, I would say it's 5. I really did love it. How it's done and the possible use of the word that may or may not be in there, it brings it down to 4.5, somewhere in there. But there are not very many movies that I would give 4 stars to these days, so that's pretty high. But yeah, so if you have a chance to see it, I feel like sometimes these things, when you see them on a big screen, they become a little larger than life. And sometimes that's good. You know, if you have a truly horrific event, sometimes we need that enormity to really impress upon us. And whereas, like Little Women, I do not need to see on the big screen. And that's not important to me at all. There's nothing. I like the quiet hominess of a home screen, and we do not have a big TV in our home. I just like the home. It just kind of pulls you in and draws you in. But when something is really impactful and needs to pack a punch, sometimes that really big screen helps do that. And I would say that watching Bonhoeffer on the big screen, it did do that. So for what it's worth, just throwing it out there. Meanwhile, I guess I need to show you my Advent stuff, and I'll see you tomorrow. You're going to see a lot of this sweatshirt and my other sweatshirt, because it just dawned on me. It's like, I only have a month to wear these things. I'm going to wear them a whole lot. Like this one I've been wearing, actually both of them I've been wearing for my walks in the morning, put my sweater on over it and try not to freeze for the first, quarter of a mile or so, because it's really cold out there. It's like in the 30s, and so I'm really cold. And then by the time you warm yourself up, I'm unzipping my jacket going but so yeah, it just dawned on me. You're probably gonna see this a lot. I'm just putting it out there, just putting it out there. Alrighty, I will chat with you guys later, but I have some writing to do, and I'll probably show you. I got a box of books, and I have to say, it never gets old. I should probably do a reel, but it does. It never gets old. Opening that first box of new paperbacks, and you work so hard on this book, and you pull it out, and you're like, yes, that never gets old. But once in a while, there's just that extra special book. I mean, I love all the books I write, or I wouldn't be writing it, right? But once in a while, there's just this extra specialness to a book, and you're like, yeah, I like this book. And that's what this one's like. So I'll share that too, just because why shouldn't you see it? And I hope you have a great day. Have a really, really great day.
Cheap grace means grace sold on the market like cheap jacks wares. The sacraments, the forgiveness of sin, and the consolations of religion are thrown away at cut prices. Grace is represented as the Church's inexhaustible treasury from which she showers blessings with generous hands without asking questions or fixing limits. Grace without price. Grace without cost. The essence of grace, we suppose, is that the account has been paid in advance, and because it has been paid, everything can be had for nothing. Since the cost was infinite, the possibilities of using and spending it are infinite. What would grace be if it were not cheap? Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession, absolution without personal confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate. Costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a man will go and sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price to buy, which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. It is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it's grace because it gives a man the only true life. It's costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. Ye were bought at a price. And what has cost God so much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our life, but delivered him up for us. Costly grace is the incarnation